Longpa, there's a question here. The question is from someone with initials 123. And the question is, thank you for talking about the kilesas, which are our daily challenges. When Longpa talks about practice, is Longpa referring to fighting against the kilesas, or does Longpa refer to meditation practice? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Well, both. The kind of intense practice of a meditation session is when you're really perhaps have the best opportunity to see kilesas arising. You know, as you're trying to follow the breath, bring mindfulness up with the breathing, you have distracting states of mind, sleepiness, worries, negativity, desires, unfulfilled desires. So when you're doing sitting or walking meditation, then of course that's the best time to really see your mind, know your mind, and recognize kilesa and find skillful ways to let them go. See them for what they are and let them go. But that doesn't mean to say they won't turn up at any other time of day. It's not like you finish your meditation session and you go off and do something else and the kilesas sort of go into hibernation until your next meditation session. Sometimes it seems like that, doesn't it? It's because it's only when we're meditating, perhaps, that we're really trying to be very mindful and observe what's coming up in our behavior. And then the rest of the time, it's too hard, too difficult. So you're just going to let go and you just follow along on autopilot, whatever activities you've got to do, whether it's work or social things, or you're just on your own, you know, enjoying your own time, recreation, entertainment, whatever. You know, much of the time we don't really notice kilesa at work. But then if you do practice regularly meditation in a formal sense, sitting, walking, even if it's only for a short period every day, that brings your mind back to that point every time you meditate. And then of course that's going to have a very powerful conditioning effect in the rest of your day and rest of your life, because one of the most powerful kinds of karma you make is the practice of and development of mindfulness and then reflection on what's going on using the Four Noble Truths, maybe. So becoming aware of different kinds of kilesas coming up, recognizing them and then letting them go. That's such a powerful kind of good karma that it's going to have its good effect at other times. So quite naturally, maybe in your day, from time to time, you might feel a bit stressed, falling into some irritation, anger, or maybe worried about something, or maybe you have a lot of desire that's affecting you. And there'll be times when you see it, you see kilesas coming up. Maybe you're feeling jealous about someone at work because they always seem to get on, get ahead, and get better things than you in one way or another. You know, whether it's true or not is another thing, but you may have that emotion to deal with. So that's a kilesa. So you might notice that coming up. Oh, I'm really jealous now. And that's a result of having developed mindfulness in your meditation sessions, but it means your mindfulness is heightened through your day as well. So you notice anger, you notice jealousy, you notice different kinds of greed, you notice the kind of views and opinions you hold on things coming up in situations. Maybe someone has a different view than you, and so you notice that. Because you've been improving your mindfulness practice in the formal meditation sessions, doesn't mean to say it won't make you more mindful at other times, but it may only be occasional. And then there'll be big periods where you're not very mindful at all, and maybe you sort of fall into a state of suffering, agitation, and you don't know where it came from and how you got there. And then it's like, oh, I've got to start again. Oh, I just got really angry and lost it, or I've just been really agitated about something, or I've been really lazy and stubborn about something, you know. And you've got to suddenly pull yourself together because you've now seen a kilesa that was creeping up on you perhaps and you didn't notice before. And our practice is like that. There's times when you're really aware and putting forth effort into mindfulness practice, and you notice kilesas, and you maybe really try to work with them. So really try to let go of some anger, bring up more kindness, tolerance, patience with something that brings you anger, for example. But then there'll be other times when your effort is slipping and you just don't notice things, or they take over your mind. It's only later on you realize, oh, I was completely deluded this period and it's really affected me. Now I've got to deal with it. And you sort of come back, and maybe the best way to reestablish mindfulness is do a little bit of meditation from here, time to time. So even 5 minutes breathing meditation in the middle of your day when you're feeling particularly stressed can be really useful. You just find a quiet corner, or you just sit at your desk or wherever you are, and you just do a few moments of mindfulness of breathing, just to bring you back to the present moment and maybe get you through a particular problem that was arising. So our practice is an ongoing thing. Sometimes we're doing it in a very determined way, really struggling, really fighting, as you say, fighting with the kilesas. Other times it may be a more general level of practice and mindfulness, and we know there's kilesas hanging around in our behavior, but there's not a lot we can do about it, and so we just hang on. So sometimes you just have to be patient. And you've got something bubbling away in your heart, but maybe say you're at work, you maybe have strong desire come up. Maybe there's someone at work you really are falling for, but you've already got a partner, but this person, you keep seeing them, so you see a lot of lust coming up at work, but there's nothing you can do at that time other than hang on and not follow it. And then maybe later you have to go back home and start really thinking about your behavior. Do you want to break up your relationship, end your relationship? That's fighting with the kilesa, isn't it? Or maybe there's someone at work who makes you really angry because of what they've said or done, but at the time there's nothing you can do. You're just full of rage. All you can do is just keep a lid on it, so it's inside, but you're not going off and throttling them maybe. But later you have to go home and you have to really work with it. You say, oh, I got so angry, what can I do about this? Because if you don't do anything, or you go back tomorrow and it's still there, maybe it will get worse. So you might have to work really hard at some time, sooner or later, to calm yourself down, let go of that anger. So working with kilesas, we work on different levels: minor kilesas, major kilesas. Sometimes you just have to hold on, hang on patiently until you've got a better opportunity to do it. Other times you have to just be very direct in your practice. So you're in the situation when you're married or in a relationship, and you're tempted to flirt with someone and you just walk away. That's working with kilesa. Following kilesa would be flirt with them and cheat on your partner. Or you're really angry with someone. Working with kilesa would be you just do everything in your power to restrain your own anger when you would love to just take it out on that person, but you don't. That's working with the kilesa, and that's really good practice. But sometimes we fail. So you do take it out on the person and you have a shouting match, or say something really nasty or mean to them. Then you have to work on it, on the consequences. So you have to maybe apologize, eat humble pie, work through it, somehow get through the awkwardness of the whole thing, get back to a place of normality. There's so many ways we're working with kilesas, sometimes very strong, sometimes very minor. But just keep going. Sometimes they say the harder you practice, the more kilesas will come out. And then people get discouraged because they say, I've been working so hard with my meditation and trying to keep the precepts, and my mind is just full of kilesa. Sometimes that's a good sign. It's a sign that you are being much more mindful, working harder with your kilesa. So yes, they seem to come up more, but they're not coming up more. It's just you're noticing them more, and that's a good sign.
Thank you, Lampo. Lampo, there's a question.
There's a question here. Can I just ask one question in the audience here? And I'll read it out here. I'll let you know.
Yes, please, Lampo.
Okay, we'll have time for more questions in a minute, but you had a question, yeah?
My question is, during you ended the talk with saying that everything is good enough, right? My question is, as per meditation, the main goal would be to be unanimous to all sensations. So my question is, if you become really unanimous to all the sensations, everything around you, how are you supposed to push yourself to be there? Like, if you're already saying that everything is good enough, how then that's a comfortable state. And for someone who's doing things in the world, how is he supposed to push himself?
Yeah, I understand. There was a question here about this phrase, "it's good enough." So if you're using "it's good enough" as a reflection, whether in meditation or just in life, how do you live in the world when quite often you have to improve things and improve yourself, and you have to maybe have goals and ambitions, and you need to do things. So if everything is good enough, doesn't that just make you very kind of too content, complacent, sit back and not do anything at all? So how do you deal with that? So yeah, I didn't talk a lot about this. It just came up at the end. But the phrase "it's good enough" is a particular remedy for the discontented mind. So what is the opposite of the feeling "it's good enough"? It's the feeling "it's not good enough." If you are, particularly mindful and reflective, you may use the reflection "it's not good enough" as a way to stimulate to do more good things. We often need to do more in our life, of course. But this reflection, "it's a good enough," is more to counter mindless greed, mindless obsession, things that causes a lot of suffering, a lot of ill will, negativity, the complaining mind, the fault-finding mind. That's the mind that you use "it's good enough" to deal with. Because the opposite of "it's good enough" is "it's not good enough." And when you're angry, well, it's an unpleasant mind state to be in. Or when you've already got quite a lot, but you don't recognize that, your mind is just taken over by endless greed and desire. It's not peaceful. It's never peaceful. It's never enough when you're in that kind of mind state. So you use "it's good enough" as a way to bring up the appreciation of what you have achieved, what you have got so far. And that isn't to say that, you can't go on and do things in your life, but it's to counter the obsession, or we say the clinging to the desire, endless desire for more, bigger, better, more, because it really is endless. Even the Buddha was motivated to practice. He said, they asked him, "What kept you going until you reached enlightenment?" And he said, "Well, it was the discontent with the suffering I still experience." It was gradually getting less and less in his practice, but even at the very end of his practice before his enlightenment, he still had a slight discontent. Is that, I still, my mind is not completely pure and peaceful yet. There's still something missing. So that led him on to look and investigate and practice more. So even in meditation or spiritual practice, you have motivation. Your motivation is to end suffering, to find true peace, true liberation, you might say. And that's a valid motivation. But as you're doing that, you also need to be able to appreciate what you've done and what the good things are as you go. Otherwise, your mind is constantly going into dissatisfaction of a very destructive sort. So you notice this mostly in meditation. When you're meditating, if you're still caught with a lot of desire for results, desire for better things, improvement, that can actually be one of the biggest obstacles, because you're sitting there saying, "I want more, I need to attain this." And so meditators are often saying, "I need to attain a state of concentration," or "I need to get rid of all my thoughts." And that very desire to get rid of or attain often is an obstacle, because it keeps agitating the mind. So if in that case, you might bring up the reflection, "it's good enough." the meditation I'm doing now is good enough. My body is good enough. My state of mind is good enough. I may have some mental states of kilesa coming up. I have some greed, some anger, some worry, some memories coming up, but it's good enough. I'll work with this. So it's more of a skillful attitude to counter states of obsession, clinging, negativity, and so on. So you might just call it a tool that you use sometimes. For example, in daily life, say you're in a relationship. If you're careless and you keep saying, my partner is not good enough, that relationship's not going to last very long. If you can appreciate the good in your partner, even though they're not perfect, just as you would hope they can appreciate the good in you, even though you're not perfect, then you can get on together and you can live together. But if you're always saying, they're not good enough, I want better than this, well, then you're not going to live together very well. Same with a job. If you want to have a go at a job, well, you have to accept, at least up until a point, it's good enough. I'm going to work with this. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'll put my effort into it. Because if every day you go to work and it's not good enough, you're going to be very unhappy. And, probably it's just not going to work, is it? You'll leave that job very quickly. You won't get on. So it's one aspect of contentment that we use just to keep the mind in a good space, but it's not complacency. Sorry, if you have other questions there over in Singapore, please, you can read them out, or people can come into the conversation.
Anyone wants to come into the conversation and ask your question in person, feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you. In the meanwhile, we'll switch gear, Lumpur. There's a question around the current international conflicts, the geopolitical unrest happening around some countries. So this person's question is, how does one as a Buddhist practitioner reflect and react to such things that are happening? And his second question is also, is world peace really practical, and is it possible?
Sorry, what was that? Is it practical to affect the current situation, you mean?
Is world peace, is world peace practical, and is it possible?
Well, we've always got to be hopeful, aim in the right direction. And one thing we should be aware of that people often forget, because when the news comes up of another conflict, another problem, it's distressing, it's hard to watch, it's very sad. But we tend to forget the overall picture or the broader picture. And the broader picture is actually that the world is a lot more peaceful than it used to be. Even with this current conflict. Any conflict is bad, unwanted, we don't want it. But actually the world is much more peaceful than it has been for centuries. And as we know, even in the time of the Buddha, there were wars. It's not like this is a new phenomena. But generally, human beings are actually killing each other less than before as a percentage or statistically. That's not any excuse for any kind of killing. Any killing is always bad. It's suffering. It's bad karma. It has terrible consequences. But just generally, the overall picture is there is more peace, more less social destruction than before. But when the news comes up of the latest problem, we tend to forget the bigger picture, or that goes into the background. Really, the only way you can achieve peace is working outwards from yourself, isn't it? Which is why I say if everyone could do a bit more mindfulness of breathing, practice more tolerance, get to know what is motivating them, especially when they start acting in aggressive ways. If each individual does more of that, that will be the best contribution to world peace. If everyone committed to the 5 precepts as a daily guideline for their behavior, all conflicts would suddenly become very minor or minimal, and that people might still have disagreements, but they wouldn't solve them in a violent way. So the 5 precepts, that's the way to solve the world's problems. Get more people keeping the 5 precepts. So it's very sad when one country invades another, one country has a big army so they can kind of bully or attack another. I don't think it's a very good solution to problems. And this war, they're calling it the unnecessary war. Like, it didn't need to happen. There's other ways to solve the problems that they're trying to solve. You can sympathize with everyone, whether it's in Russia, Ukraine. People have fears of security and whatever the reasons they give for to engage in war. You can sympathize. Everyone has those kind of things, but those kind of feelings and fears. But violence only breeds more violence. More people die. But the way we can really help is encourage, from this end, from where we are, encourage people to resolve their differences peacefully, to show restraint, practice mindfulness of speech, mindfulness of action. And we have to be the example. Each individual has to be example. So that's the starting point. We have to do it ourselves, practice it ourselves, and then maybe encourage our leaders and the people in more positions of power and influence to encourage it as well. So encourage our leaders to tell them to stop fighting and do whatever they can to stop it. You just do the best you can, but sometimes it doesn't work. With all the best intentions, people don't listen, people are not ready to stop. So you just have to wait until conditions change, situations change maybe, and then you can talk again or encourage them to solve their differences peacefully and not to hurt each other. You just do the best you can, but you have to start from yourself first and work outwards and encourage people around you, to see the dangers and the terrible consequences of war. And we can all do more, so we just carry on doing more ourselves. We've still got anger within ourselves. So that's one thing you can contribute to reducing the conflicts, the aggression in the world. You work with your own anger, and that's somewhere where you definitely can work with, and you definitely can see results if you keep the 5 precepts. So you get angry with someone at work, you're not going to hurt them, you're not going to use divisive speech, abusive speech, you're not going to try and physically threaten anyone or harass anyone. That's a really good starting point, isn't it? We work with ourselves outwards, and then we do our best to encourage others to do the same.
That's so beautifully concluded, Nongpo. At this point in time, I don't think I have any more question from the floor, but might it be suitable on behalf of everyone here that we ask permission from you, Nongpo, and all the Sanghas at Bodhipala Monastery to lead us in the chanting and dedication of merits, as we accrue this session with a lot of wholesome practice and the merits that we accrue. May we also take this opportunity to share these merits to all those who are suffering in various parts of the world right now, particularly those in Ukraine and Russia, and the civilians who are undergoing all these suffering, and that may good senses prevail, and may they all come out of this quickly and safely.
So we'll chant verses of sharing an aspiration together.
Yes, if you might lead us.
In English or Pali?
As you wish.
Okay, in English maybe. Venerable Jnanadeepa will lead us. He's got the microphone.
Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world. May the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. By the protective power of the 10 meritorious deeds, may Mara gain no opening.